first returns management webinar. We're so excited to have you here today. My name is Delana Linsgraff, and I'm a research content specialist with Spinnaker. We have tons of amazing professionals joining us for our first talk on returns. So today we're going to be talking about returns management and the maturity curve, and leading the conversation are Spinnaker experts Jack DeButts and Paul Adamson. So before I introduce Paul and Jack, I just want to take 30 seconds to tell you a little bit about Spinnaker. So we are a supply chain consulting firm specializing in technology enablement and execution services. And on our returns management side of the business, we offer both consulting services as well as full-on outsourcing of returns through our 8 centers located nationwide. So of course, if you have any questions after the webinar, we'll provide contact info for you to get in touch. And I promise you that's the last sales pitch you'll hear today. So now to introduce you all to Jack and Paul. Jack has an incredibly interesting professional career. For over 20 years, Jack worked in leadership roles in the medical device industry before transitioning to the electronics world of Dell. Jack served in leadership positions with Dell in returns management for 8 of the 13 years that he worked there. And at Dell, Jack really took the returns management to the next level. He developed the global retail returns process from startup to $70 million in secondary market revenue. He also improved product recovery by over $5 million in 2 years. At Spinnaker, we are super excited because this year, Jack has been selected by Supply Chain Executive Magazine as a pro to know. So now let's talk about Paul. Paul Adamson has an equally interesting career, and he brings an expertise in sustainability. Paul served as Vice President of Round 2, an Avnet company, and in this role, he built out the company's core repair, reuse, and recycling business from startup to $55 million in revenue. My favorite fun fact about Paul is that he coordinated the announcement of the U.S. National Strategy for Electronic Stewardship, which was a critical initiative for driving electronic sustainability across all U.S. government departments. So we're very lucky that this dynamic duo has joined Spinnaker. So before we start, I want to touch on logistics briefly. If you have any technical issues come up, you can message me in the chat box that's located in the right-hand corner of your screen, and I'll try to troubleshoot during the webinar. And also, if time permits, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if there's any questions that come up for Paul and Jack that you want them to answer, you can also message those in the chat box. And any questions that we don't get to, we're going to be sure to address those in our LinkedIn group, the Returns Management Leadership Exchange, which we recently launched. We really want this to be a lively, interactive group, so make sure you join. Now I'll hand it over to Paul to walk us through our agenda for today.
Thank you, Delana. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining our first webinar for returns management. The agenda is pretty simple for today. We've got 6 main things we're going to cover, and then hopefully get into some good Q&A at the end. So we've gone through our introductions. We're going to talk through our goals for the session. We're going to give you our view on the returns management maturity curve. We're going to apply that maturity curve to a case study related to Dell, since they're near and dear to Jack's heart. We'll talk through some industry trends in returns management, and then leave you with some keys to success for your returns management program. So goals for the session. Well, we're going to define the maturity curve. If you don't understand it, then obviously we can't go any further in this conversation, so we're going to walk you through our view of it. We're going to help you understand where you are on the maturity curve. Everybody likes to be graded, so it's good to know where you are. We'll help you understand what makes a returns management rookie all the way up to pros and all-stars. And then we'll talk through some available tools and technology to improve your returns management. And now let me introduce my partner in crime, Jack DeButts, and see if he has anything to add to that. Jack?
Hey, thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. No, nothing really to add to that. Most of you will appreciate the cartoon that's being displayed on the screen right now. You know, just about everybody is familiar with the getting from point A to point B, as the cartoon is saying. In other words, if you go into just about any organization, just about anyone, I'm going to say conservatively 90% of the time, if you ask somebody who is running your forward supply chain, somebody's going to give you a name. Oh, that's so-and-so who's VP of supply chain. But you go ask that same question, and again, like the cartoon, now you've stumped me. And that's the kind of look you get when you ask somebody, oh, well, tell me who's responsible for your returns management. And you start hearing the crickets, if you will. So what we want to do today is go through with this maturity curve and really help show you guys maybe some ways and some tools on how to get from point B to point A and where you may be along the lines of the technology curve and the returns management maturity curve.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack. So let's kick this off and talk about why we need a maturity curve. You got to have one, because if you don't have one, you can't define what great looks like. And we all want a strong, robust, great returns management process and program. We're going to help you guys look at your maturity process as a way to increase the visibility of your efforts in returns. We're going to help use the maturity curve to justify expenditures. So if you want to move from rookie to AAA and up, you're going to have to invest in your returns process. Headcount, technology, tools will help you manage expectations of what your process can do by applying it to the maturity curve and where you are. We'll do some lessons learned from industry pioneers. And at the end of this, what you really can do is use the maturity curve to help develop your professional goals as a returns expert. Jack, you got anything to add on this?
Yeah, I do, Paul. Thanks. So the fact is that most companies don't really know where they stand relative to their industry peers or compared with other industries. They're happy to kind of get their jobs going, just to get the process going, to get the product received and customer crediting. Again, I love this cartoon. Most companies, they think they're doing just fine. They've got the happy face on, and unfortunately sometimes the customers aren't sharing that specific happy face, if you will. What I've found in many places that I've gone into is the reason some of the happy face is there is because that's truly what they think. However, when you dig in sometimes, what you find is that happy face is not necessarily shared throughout all of the ranks, with all of the stakeholders and business partners. And with the customer, sometimes the customer, the returns crediting process is so cumbersome, the customer gets frustrated, and that's the sad face. The thing that most of us know is that if you don't have easy returns processes, you're likely not going to have loyal customers. And if you don't have loyal customers, you're not going to have repeat customers, which is what everybody wants. So let's take a high-level view of the returns management maturity curve, because I'm sure that's what a lot of you want to see, and what we can do about that. Now, as you can see, there are a lot of points on here defining, from the rookie up to the all-star. We are not going to, in this webinar, due to time constraints, go through a line by line by line of each individual point on the curve. But we will talk a little bit about the extremes. You notice on the I'm going to call it the rookie elevation, they may be at the stage, and let me tell you this, I've lived from rookie to all-star, so I know a little bit about the progression going up here. In the rookie side, you may have a laptop and a scanner. You're going to go out, scan your receipts. You're going to maybe download them into an Excel sheet, put them in an email to accounting for crediting. Where some of the complexities start to arise let's say on the rookie end, or when you have things such as damaged returns or incomplete returns or the customer-induced damage. And you really need to contact the customer, and you need to have some means by, how are you going to, adjust your crediting. And most will sell to resellers or tear down the units for reconsumption of the units for services and or remanufacturing. As you move up into the, let's call it the AAA, you're going to see companies that are starting to engage in things such as value stream mapping and some continuous improvement efforts. And again, I'm not saying that nobody does this below the AAA. This is really just, a continuum of a point in time. So I want to be clear that, different stages do different things. But if you're in this continuum, this is what you should be doing at this stage. Then you have the all-stars. The all-stars, most have their product dispositioned before it's ever received. They know what's coming in, and they know what they're going to do with it prior to arriving. They also typically possess the technology that they're able to receive the product into the company. It's accounted for by inventory control, accounted for by operations and finance and accounting. But you know, one of the biggest things that the All-Stars will have that some of the other points won't have, and that's that executive support. It is key to be an All-Star, to be really successful, to have that high-level executive support at a VP or executive VP level. Lastly, the All-Stars have dedicated teams for the most part on dispositioning. They know the markets. They know where the maximum net recoveries reside. You know, oftentimes, you know, online is going to be your max recovery. Sometimes it won't be. Sometimes you're going to go with resellers. Sometimes your best option is really to donate the product. Other times you're going to tear it down and you're going to reconsume the product for remanufacturing and or your service needs. And then there's the salvage. I will tell you that it happens occasionally, but in your All-Star specifically, landfill is rarely, if ever, a disposition option. There's usually somebody willing to pay for the residuals that you have left over.
Excellent.
Thank you, Paul.
Cool. Thank you, Jack. Now that we have a broader view of that returns management maturity curve, and we've tried to apply a colloquial view, right, taking it back to baseball and really making it more common terms, but the meat behind it really doesn't change. And what we've done at Spinnaker is we've applied our 5 lens approach, which we use in consulting in order to find the best ways to manage a solution and assess a situation. So if you look at it, Jack, we talk in terms of process and technology and so forth under our 5 lenses. What do you view as the most important lens when it comes to the maturity curve?
Thanks, Paul. I'm sure many of those in our listening audience may have differing opinions, but for me it starts with the organization, and it really starts, as I mentioned previously, with that upper level VP, executive VP support. What this does, this enhances your likelihood of securing the resources, the funding, and the technology required to be an all-star performer. And continuing with that organizational lens, you also are going to need the support from your stakeholders. You might ask, who are they? Well, as most of you know, in returns management, as we've already kind of determined, for the most part, there's not one person responsible. Oftentimes, operations, finance, inventory, sales, remarketing, they may report up to 5 different VPs, if you will. If one of those particular ones are not having a pain point, they may not be on board to support the ongoing efforts you need for the resourcing, the funding, and the technology. So what I always encourage folks to do is go and network and make sure that you are communicating with your stakeholders regularly, the operations, finance, accounting, inventory control, and so forth. Some companies meet weekly or bi-weekly with these stakeholders. I found it best, and what I have done at places I've worked is we met every day. We met every morning. Then moving on to the business policies, outside of having the executive support, it all begins with your returns management strategy, right? Do I even want my returns back? You may have some low-cost items that you decided, you know what, I don't even want them back. Even though you don't want them back, they're going to wind up somewhere, and you might want to understand where they're going to go. You might want to decide, do I want to insource or outsource if you're going to get into computer refurbishing? And I've had companies come to me and ask, oh, I want to get into computer refurbishing, who do I talk to? I said, well, I'm a big believer in don't get outside of your core competencies. And so if you're wanting to do that, that is great. I'll partner with somebody who's doing it well right now, because wherever you go to try to get your customers with this, they're going to ask what experience you have. And if you're going to say, well, I partner with so-and-so, that company may be known in the industry. If you're trying to get somebody from scratch, that's a little more difficult to do. So, you want to go also with what are going to be my disposition options, and I must have a sustainability and green disposal program to be an all-star. The processing, the customer crediting needs to be seamless to the, in the lean processing. most of you know, or some of you know on this call, about consumer electronics depreciation. Depending on what white paper you read, that depreciation is going to be anywhere from 1 to 2% per week. You've got to have the lean processing to get that product through as quickly as possible. I like to say that electronics are not like a fine wine. They do not get better with age. They actually get more toxic with age, so you want to get through the, get them in and get them out as quickly as possible. And then the technology side, honestly, this is where a lot of companies struggle. If you're in operations, you can develop the lean processing to move product quickly and into finished goods, but tracking this product from receipt to processing, disposition, the finished goods and out, that's a little more complex. That being said, there are not a lot of standalone products out there. There are one or two that are very good, but today that's something that's really lacking. Some of the big guys, Oracle, SAP, they do have modules that work, but they're not really in the detail most of the all-stars will need. Metrics, wow, so where does one start and end with metrics? At a minimum, you need to really be managing basically what was received, what was shipped, and what's still in the four walls aging. You'll also want to collect data that is important to your stakeholders. You know, what's important to your accounting group, to your inventory control group. You know, what did you sell today? And what's coming in. If sales knows what's coming and know how much is coming, they can work on deals. Operations can get a better idea of, you know, what kind of headcount do they need. You can also predetermine, you know, what kind of components am I going to need for the remanufacturing. Here's a news flash that won't be a flash to most of you. You can't sell what you don't have. You need to really understand what's coming in and what you're going to do with it. Paul, back to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Jack. So we're going to make sure everybody has been paying close attention. It's quiz time, which Lord knows if you're like me, you love a good quiz. So we're going to take a little flash poll, and we're asking you, after what we've shared with you about the maturity curve, how do you view your company? Where are you on the maturity curve? So pick one of the boxes, and as soon as the results are in, we're going to share those quick results, that little flash poll results. And also we're starting to get some questions in. A couple of them are a little longer than what I can do during this little flash poll, so we'll push those towards the end of the webinar today.
Almost everyone has answered. One sec.
About 10 more seconds, and we're going to close the poll. Yes, Delana? Perfect. And results are in. Oh, it looks like we have a lot of people that feel they're pretty good at returns management. Good to know. All right, so as we move along, if you feel you were completely honest with those results, as we teach you more about the maturity curve, I think it'll be eye-opening. So let's move along. I'm going to push this back onto Jack and talk about what I think was a pretty exciting time for Jack in his work at Dell. He worked on several global initiatives, but I think one of the ones that was most intriguing for him overall was Dell's entry into retail. And this will really illustrate, while Dell is mature in their returns processing, where you can still stumble and how good companies recover. So Jack, why don't you talk to us about this story?
Sure, Paul. This is kind of one of those situations where I went from the rookie to the other end, but it was not an easy trip, for this. As a matter of fact, I did work on several large global initiatives, and entering into retail was certainly a big one. So 2006, Dell got into the retail game. At the time, I was the production control manager at the America's Return and Refurbishment Center in Austin. I had seen some emails indicating Dell was getting into retail, but honestly, I didn't understand the impact on the return center. I just didn't know what this was going to mean. And one day, the first trailer of returns came in from Walmart. Called the account executive and asked him, hey, what would you like me to do with these retail returns? The response surprised me a little bit. The response was, well, Jack, I kind of thought you might figure that out. Clearly, there was not a defined process in place. So I started digging into this because I could see this was going to get bad in a hurry if something wasn't done. So I dug into it. I found there was a contract. And guess what? In that contract were terms and conditions on how many, what time frame units could be returned. Start asking questions like, when does the time clock start on date caps? How many of these can be returned? And so forth. So, as I affectionately tell people, I went back into the warehouse with my Big Chief tablet and crayon. That's not the technology I'm using. Actually, it was a laptop and a scanner. But I quickly, and I'm saying quickly, determined I needed help, and I needed help in a hurry. When I initially talked with IT, again, understand we're blowing and going. We're getting into this retail market. They said, well, we don't really have time to help you right now. We're still trying to, I know it sounds painfully obvious. You ought to be able to get product from your company to a retailer, but if any of you who have worked with OEMs and retailers know nothing's ever quite that simple. So they said, no, look, we're still trying to figure out how to get product into retailers. Sorry, I don't really have time for you right now. As my palms were sweating and I'm getting a little nervous, I did have a guy in sales operations that I would call a techie guy. He really turned out to be a lifesaver. Interimly, he developed an access database for me to take these receipts by service tag, ensure that they were in the date and volume compliance window. And honestly, there's way too much for me to go over today, but just leave it to say I really had my hands full with this. We did figure it out, and I've started to become involved in all future global retail contracts that we implemented in the U.S. and abroad. And so we got the technology in place. We took this whole process and we were able to, with a few variances, cut and paste to be able to put it in Europe and to put it in Asia. But it was really a terrific learning curve for myself specifically and for the teams, and I think for Dell as a whole. Again, nobody clearly always understands going into these things what the requirements are on returns world when big companies, maybe even little companies, get so involved on the front end, getting product, I'm going to say new revenue. Well, that's what's important to them. And so they're not really thinking about the returns part. Turned out okay because I got really interested in it, and I became very quickly involved with it and brought it up to speed.
Excellent.
Thank you, Paul.
Cool. Thanks, Jack. So knowing that case study, right, talking about the pain of an established company entering a new market, and the trials you face and how the processes you have established can see you through the evolution and even into a new market area. What I want to do is I want to take that and the lessons learned, and I want you, on this slide, we've broken it out into really 5 key areas that define the maturity of Dell that you just illustrated. And I'd like you to take a few minutes and just walk us through these 5 areas and why they are really the cornerstones of a mature returns management process.
Sure, Paul. While I guess I am partial to Dell because I did spend a lot of time when I felt like taking Dell to that mature company. It was a lot of hard work, guys. I mean, it really takes, you got to have those internal champions. I was very, very fortunate to, again, these executives that I got support from, let me just tell you, they didn't come running to me asking how I can help, to be honest with you. I went to them. And I did develop relationships. Once they understood, they clearly got it, I really started getting just about all the support that I needed. We talked about the many of these attributes, earlier in the webinar, so I will just bring up a few. If you were an OEM, as an example, you always want to tie off with your new side sales. you want the separation in price from your new side sales to your refurbished. And they need to be running promos, and their promo may be where you're running your normal online specials to begin with. Well, you don't really want to continue in that mode. You need to have some separation. The other thing that we started was we used what we call credited pickup. Most of you know that a credited pickup, it isn't like UPS goes and picks your unit up, scan it, and all of a sudden your credit card is credited. There's usually multiple levels that have to be gone through in order for a customer to get credited. What it did is it took away some of the preliminary steps. We didn't actually do the crediting until the actual unit was returned. You know, emphasizing once again that one of the key things is meeting with those stakeholders. You know, understanding, you know, all of these things, you know, that make this mature company, right? The technology, the weekly meeting, you know, and again, I recommended daily meetings. We met daily to say what's coming in, how much is the operations side signing up to produce, how many we're going to put into finished goods, into the sales teams, you know, what are you going to tell us you're going to sell? And then you're making these tweaks every day. Let's just say in a perfect world, something, you know, 1,000 came in, 1,000 were processed, 1,000 went into finished goods, and sales sold 1,000. That's a good day. Let's say the next day 1,200 came in, 1,000 were processed, so forth and so on. Now you've got 200 extra. How are you going to get those processed through to keep so you don't start having aged WIP? Anyway, it's a balancing act all the time, but you get your stakeholders involved, you get your teams involved, and then everybody's there to help out the whole. Okay, Paul.
All right, Jack, thank you. What I'm going to do now is I'd like to share some of the trends impacting the current and future returns processes. First thing I'm going to walk through is an illustration related to retail returns. So while companies have continued to invest over the years, you can see that the overall retail return percentage has not been impacted truly over the last 7 years. So the pressure really to keep customers happy, make returns simple, has really prevented significant reductions in overall retail returns. Next, we're going to talk about some of the thoughts that we've highlighted that are most discussed in the returns management world today. Everybody listening in today might be the victim of some of these thoughts as well. You know, some of them keep you up at night. You know, significance truly is the importance of social media, the topic of returns avoidance, and the effects of price erosion on return products. We all have heard the stories of good companies getting lambasted, through social media over an event, and the impact that can really have, especially to an omni-channel type supplier or retailer. The third is maybe the most telling. We've talked in terms of the need for executive sponsorship within an organization to have a truly mature returns process. Well, if you look, there's less than 20 of the Fortune 500 companies that have named a VP level reverse or returns management expert. It's disturbing. It's obviously a trend that needs to change in the long term to be truly impactful. Finally, our returns folks need to be educated and ready to solve problems. In the U.S., there's currently a gap of 200,000 supply chain roles because of a lack of qualified talent. So if you've got kids in the listening audience, encourage them to go into supply chain and tell them to be experts in returns. So Jack, I think we're starting to wind down this first ever webinar for returns management through Spinnaker. But as we do this, I wanted to share some of the keys to success in returns management. I know the number one, probably pretty obvious at this point, we've talked about it over and over, executive champion or executive sponsorship being core to success. Beyond that, if you can walk us through the other pieces, that'd be great.
Sure, Paul. One of the things I'll comment to on your previous slide was it was interesting. I was reading through some old publications, and I come across some of you on the phone wrote some of these. What's interesting is if you didn't know those were written 10 years ago, you would have thought they were current times because some of the same problems exist today. I really found that interesting, just as a little side note. So yes, Paul, the executive champion is key. In my mind's eye, that is what's key. That's what's going to help you, drive you. It's not an end-all, be-all, but it sure makes things a little smoother down the road. We've already talked a little bit about the returns management strategy. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Do I want my product back, and so forth. But as you look into the reverse supply chain execution, right, you really talk about your receiving process, your remanufacturing. Obviously, you want some lean manufacturing lines to process here. Your warehouse management. You may also have some vendor management that goes on. Sometimes there's things that you maybe internally don't have the expertise, and so you've got to send product out to have a portion of the process done. And you want to really select your vendors carefully and really vet them out. And of course, the recycling. Your order management, you want to make sure that's correct. You want your pick, pack, and ship lines going. You want, from the time that customer orders, we talked about the crediting being seamless. You want to make sure your promise dates and so forth that you have on your order management are equally seamless, and that you meet those dates when you put them out. Another real key here is your financial management, and I've seen it go both ways, and I've seen it go both ways all at one time. Most companies, they're chasing one of two things. They're chasing revenue, or they're chasing margin. As you know, those do not live in the same house. And so while you're chasing one, you're not likely to get the other. If you're chasing margin, likely your inventories are going to grow as you're chasing that margin. And as you chase revenue, you can usually get prices low enough to get the revenue and drop your inventory levels, but your margins typically aren't going to be there. And then another key thing is, when you get a return back, what value are you going to give that unit? Some people use standard costs. Some people are going to say, oh, I'm going to use the retail cost. Some people give an arbitrary number. I'm not going to say that any of them are wrong or right, but you have to pick something by which to manage and standardize with. And then again, you always, on your inventory control, you always want to be looking for aged work in process or WIP and inventory. I already mentioned this isn't like wine. This product is not getting better with age. Sometimes what happens is the salespeople will tend to, none of you on the phone, by the way, but just other people, they will cherry pick. They will go sell whatever may be the hottest items today, to get their recoveries and to, get their sales commissions. The issue is you still have to get rid of that thing sitting over here in the corner that's got a 1/4 inch of dust on it. If you don't, you're going to wind up accumulating and accumulating and accumulating, and guess what? At some point, again, they're not getting any more valuable sitting there. You're going to have to dispose of them. So be sure and watch that and manage that as you move forward towards your all-star status.
Great points. Thanks, Jack. We're going to do another quick poll, and it's related to pain points. We're going to have you identify one or more of your biggest pain points in your returns management process. So if you can take a second, on this one you can actually select multiples, and so then we'll share the results after. A couple points. I want to thank everybody. Questions have been rolling in. A couple of them have been specific to either past clients or maybe some information that Jack may not be able to share related to Dell. But we'll open them up at the end. If he's able to talk through, then he will. Give it another 5 seconds here. Let's see. Poll results are showing. Wow. We have a clear leader. So technology. Everybody agrees that technology is one of the biggest pain points when it comes to returns management. Not surprising. We are all obviously in an industry that is handicapped from a returns management software, kind of a universal Band-Aid, so to speak, for helping us handle these from a technology standpoint. So thank you for participating in that quick flash poll. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Jack and let him walk us through some of the key takeaways from today.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you guys for participating in these. You know, it's really important for us to know, and we would also like at some point getting your candid feedback on this and the content. So key takeaways, you want to benchmark your company against the returns management maturity curve. Again, it's not an end-all be-all, but it does give you some directional things to be looking at. You want to know the functional and strategic areas to address in order to move along the returns management curve. Clearly, technology is one of those, and it is that pain point in many organizations. Acknowledge and recognize your key competencies. You know what you're good at. Most people do. Most people know what they're really good at. And it's okay if you have some missing skills, go partner with those who have them. You know, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not really good in this area. I'm going to go partner over here with so-and-so because I've seen them demonstrate and they do really well. I will tell you, the higher the leadership owning returns management, the more effective the returns management program and the better the program is supported. That may just seem like a no-brainer, but we need to really keep pushing that home. If you're in an organization today and maybe you don't have that support, I encourage you to go find who in your organization can you start walking up that ladder and start having informational one-on-ones with them. And then lastly, well, we said no more sales. However, Spinnaker can help you define and implement these effective returns management programs. So that's what we're here for.
Thanks, Jack. It wasn't too pitchy, so I think everybody's okay with it. So kind of last thoughts for today before we get into the Q&A, and it looks like we'll have time for at least one question, maybe two. But we encourage you, submit topics for future webinars. These can only be as effective as the requests for information. We have a bit of a schedule of what we want to put out there from a thought leadership standpoint. But if we can address your questions in the form of a webinar, we want to do it. If you need us, request a returns management assessment. Jack's a wizard. It's kind of like a returns ninja. We'll be happy to help out. You can learn more about returns management through our leadership exchange on LinkedIn. It's a growing group, and we encourage lots of contribution from our members. And then if you are a member of that group, today's information will be available to you. So we will publish it to the members of the LinkedIn exchange on LinkedIn. So that said, Jack, thanks for everything you shared today. Any final comments before I read the first submitted question?
No, just again, thanks everybody. We know your time is valuable. Thank you so much. And again, we will be very interested in your candid feedback, and we look forward to doing many more of these.
Perfect. Thank you. So, Jack, let's give you only the toughest question. So it looks like we'll have time for at least one. First and foremost, let's see. This one's a little tougher, so we'll see what you think of it. So, do all-stars, so people who are relatively high on the maturity curve, would they typically include recall management as part of the returns process, or do they consider it a separate process in their returns operation?
No, absolutely, Paul. You want to consider that. I had the fortune or misfortune, however you want to term it. I'm not going to mention what they were, but some pretty high level. These were more a couple of industry recalls, if you will. When that happens, I'm going to pull a number out. Let's say you're going to get 20,000 returns. Okay. Well, most people, when they're returns processing, they do not have a cavity in their warehouse that is so large to handle 20,000 returns. What are you going to do? You've got to have a process made up. You've got to have the ability to receive this product in. Sometimes if it's a defective component, the component supplier wants that defective unit back. Well, now you're handling. You've got to find a way to pull out the old bad one, put in the new one, handle, process, ship. No, that is all you want. We don't really talk about it much here because hopefully it is a unique event. But any company, any big company especially, you really need to be prepared and have contingency plans for what and where. I will share early on at one of the places I worked, I got a call. It was for 5,000 units, and it was early on in my returns career. I'm like, whoa, I don't have any place. I started calling around. I did have some contacts in the industry because I needed to find a warehouse. I needed to provide security. I needed to get IT. I needed to find out some way to scan these things. I needed conveyors and so forth and so on. It's a big deal. So yes, you need to have those contingency plans that you can, break the glass in case of emergency and get this plan out.
It sounds like a great time to partner and to keep some friendlies in the wings waiting for these type of opportunities. But I'm going to turn it a little bit on you, and this will truly be, unfortunately, our last question for the day, and then Delana will wrap it up for us. With your background with in medical instrumentation, consumer electronics, IT products, where have you seen success in the companies partnering with their vendors for return processing, ownership of inventory? Do you see that as a key driver of maturity when they're able to really partner with those supplying them the products?
Well, I don't know that is one of the specific drivers. I think the driver, what's important is having the wisdom to know what you don't know and to partner in those areas. I did have and again, won't mention where or when, a significant recall in the medical device industry. And, we had to partner with some people that had some expertise in what was being recalled. It was a big deal. You can imagine, and we made implantable devices, and so that was a big deal. We had some issues at Dell that we did, and again, we partnered with some of our logistics providers, and product coming back, and again, what's key for me is you've got to sustain those relationships while the crisis is not going on. Right, so if you want to partner, keep those relationships going with those logistics providers, consultants, or whomever it may be. Don't wait for the problem to manifest itself. Make sure you've got a broad connectivity base that you can call somebody up and you're not having to say, hey, Paul, this is Jack the Bus. Do you remember me? Instead of, hey, Paul, this is Jack. Got something here. Can you help me? It's a much better conversation.
It is about partnering when it's all said and done. We're up against the time clock, folks. I want to thank everybody for joining a very successful first event for the returns management practice for Spinnaker. Delana, if you can wrap it up for us, that'd be great.
Paul, Jack, thank you so much for your time today. We got some colorful stories and some great content. For our participants, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today for our first webinar. We hope to have quite a few in the future. We're planning some really good content for you guys. Again, all of this will be available to you on our LinkedIn group, and I will send a follow-up email with the link to join. Please submit white papers, submit questions on the LinkedIn group. We really want to make that an active community. Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.